Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Mark Weinberg, former speechwriter and comm consultant for the Reagan White House, director of public affairs there, writing a Washington Examiner about Trump's treatment of diplomats. Dangerous and disgraceful. Not only does he, Trump, not respect or appreciate them, he has obvious and dangerous contempt for people who have devoted their lives to serving our country abroad. He contrasts that with Reagan, who, he writes, insisted that on virtually every foreign trip his schedule included an event at which he could greet and thank embassy employees for their service to their country. He gave some examples of what he's talking about. To him, though, by contrast, Trump, to him being Trump, it seems that only those who came with him to Washington and who share his views are good public servants. What a naive, paranoid, and ultimately unproductive view. Trump can seek to fill some senior government ranks with as many loyalists as he can find, but at the end of the day, if he insults and demeans the bureaucracy, his presidency will fail. It will fail. To put it in terms Trump might understand, if he pisses off the hard hats who pour the concrete, there will be no building. Is that a fair characterization of Trump's attitude towards Foreign Service? For more on this topic and all things impeachment related, we're pleased to be joined by Jed Babbin, former U.S. Deputy Undersecretary of Defense and contributor to the Washington Times and the American Spectator. Jed, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to be back, guys.
Are you similarly offended by some of Trump's rhetoric in the direction of particular diplomats?
Hardly. Well, look, the president could be a little more delicate, but the president is the president. These people work for him. And you have an awful lot of people in the State Department, and quite frankly, a lot of places, including the White House, who believe that the president's judgment should be subordinated to theirs. And that's just not quite how the system works. That's not how the Constitution says it works. When you look at this guy, Vindman, an Army lieutenant colonel, and by the way, Army lieutenant colonels, when I was in the Pentagon as a deputy underschmuck or whatever I was, the basic point was those guys would get coffee. I mean,
right.
These are not
this
people
outfit
who are...
he's wearing, too, is just weird.
Well, that's the uniform is what the uniform is, and I'm not going to criticize it because, the uniform changes so many times, and we could go on and on about the beret that they wear, which is really stupid looking. But anyway, the real point is that this guy Vindman is no big stinking deal. And the fact that he thought that he was in control of policy towards the Ukraine and not the president, that is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm not going to watch these hearings. I'm so bored with it, guys. There's a lot more important stuff going on in the world.
All right, so sticking with the hearings.
Yes.
Sorry, Dan, I got.
Well, it's a ratings killing, too.
I got to ask you one more thing about.
I know, I'm a buzzkill.
Yeah, I know, but I got to ask you one more thing about this, too. Just, there was a piece at Am Greatness by Chuck DeCaro, who's a former Air Force guy, about, the medal that ambassadors, diplomats used to have that they don't seem to have anymore. Yovanovitch, she's been an ambassador in some tough places, Somalia, Armenia, Ukraine, but she reportedly cried in the private closed-door session because she had been removed, even though she has conceded prior in her career that, of course, the president has the absolute right to install or remove foreign service personnel with advice and consent of the Senate. And then, and then when she testifies publicly, she's super intimidated by a tweet.
Wow. I really have no sympathy for these people. It's really the president's job to perform public policy, perform diplomatic policy, and to form that policy. The fact of the matter is these guys are not in charge. They work for the president.
But don't you think she was used to show, look at President Trump bullying a young lady? Here he is, it's a woman. If it was a man, I don't think they would have brought him in to testify. Do you?
Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, they've got a whole lot of little stuff. That's really all they've got. There's not much more they can do, and they want to do anything they can with Ukraine. So I guess they brought her in. They would have brought her in any event, and, they want to get her to cry on TV, whatever. Again, she is a Foreign Service officer appointed at the pleasure of the president. She began under Bush 43. She was continued under Obama. And, I just remember, I believe it was in 2009 or so, that Obama fired all, or no, it was 2008. Anyway, whatever it was, Obama fired all of the Bush-appointed ambassadors, all of them at once. And you know what? That was his prerogative. If he didn't want Bush holdovers, hey, that was his business. So the point really comes down to Vienna, whatever her name is, she really has no gripe. And the fact is, it's a big television production. Frankly, it's more interesting to me that Eric Swalwell broke wind while talking to Chris Matthews.
Yeah, that was pretty
I knew
bad.
you'd be all over that story. I just knew it.
You know,
always prurient interest with you.
Bathroom humor is just what we do.
Okay, all right, here it is.
I don't want to hear
taxpayer dollars to ask the Ukrainians to help them cheat an election. And the complaint that I've heard from Republicans.
Yeah, I mean,
because that makes
Amy,
our guest.
she's a
Amy, that's great.
I'm
I've
co-hosting
got
with
two
a
young
fifth
boys.
grader.
Well, I've got
Yeah.
two sons. Right.
Well, maybe Swalwell can sell some whoopee cushions that have his logo on it to retire his campaign debt.
That's perfect.
I mean, honestly, romper room over here.
I love it.
Anyway, back to serious matters, Jed Babbin. What about this idea that if you don't essentially figure out a way to work with the bureaucracy, you will have a failed presidency? I thought that was an interesting piece from that Mark Weinberg op-ed I was referencing.
There is a lot of truth to that. I mean, the fact is, again, when I was in the Pentagon, we had what we called the entrenched bureaucracies, now called the deep state. And you have to find a way to work with them, or they will do nothing. They will not obey your orders. They will not do what you intend them to do. And it's just the fact of life. So you have to find a way to either get around them, which I was fairly good at, or to do something to work with them. It's the only choice you really have. The only third choice is to try to fire them, and that's pretty bloody well impossible because civil servants are almost impossible to fire.
Do you think Trump is contemplating the idea of providing testimony the way he did during the Mueller investigation, perhaps in written form, perhaps even more entertainingly, he'll show up and do it in person? Wouldn't that be fun? Do you think that would be advisable?
I think written answers would probably be okay. I think the president should not go up there and appear in front of a congressional committee. I think that's basically a separation of powers issue. It's a constitutional issue that the president, I don't think, has full appreciation of. So he needs to be really counseled by his lawyers to say, hey, boss, don't do it this way. If you want to do something with them, answer in writing. And oh, by the way, we, the lawyers, will prepare the answers.
Help if I turn my microphone on. Excuse me. Do you think, quickly, there was some breaking news. Julian Assange, Sweden has dropped the rape charges against Julian Assange. Do you think is he going to still be convicted here and charged in the United States?
Well, if we can ever get our hands on him, yeah. I mean, the fact is that Britain ought to extradite him here. The fact that the charges of rape have been dropped really clears the way for them to do that. And, the guy is clearly, as Mike Pompeo said when he was CIA director, WikiLeaks was functioning as a hostile intelligence agency, not a journalist medium. So it's not something that he should ever get away with, and I'm hopeful that he will be extradited and convicted here. I think there's an overwhelming number of charges that are going to be easily proven against him.
Do you think Pam Anderson will wait for him while he's in prison if that does happen? I mean, since we're off the rails here talking about all kinds of nonsense. Okay, no, I got a serious matter for you, Jed Babbin. It's so serious that you wrote about it and at the Spectator. These military clemencies, they sort of haven't gotten a lot of attention because of the impeachment drama, but to the attention they've got, it's been critical. President Trump granted clemency to 3 military men, 2 Army officers, a Special Forces major, one of them, and a Navy Chief Petty Officer who were accused essentially of and convicted of war crimes. What's your take on that decision to grant clemency?
Well, he got 2 out of 3 right. And let me just set the record straight immediately. Navy SEAL CPO Eddie Gallagher was acquitted of the charges. And he was only convicted of posing for a picture with a dead
yes, that's
enemy.
Right. Yeah, that's
so
right.
that really, so the issues had been decided. That was a case in which the Gallagher case was a case in which the Navy had basically persecuted Gallagher. They had kept him in solitary confinement, which was outrageous. And even worse than that, the prosecutors for the Navy illegally intercepted emails between Gallagher's lawyers. And that was something that, it was bad enough that when they were given medals for that conduct by the Navy, which was itself outrageous, the president also revoked those medals. So the Gallagher case was very clear. He'd been acquitted. In fact, the guy who actually did kill the man, the suspected enemy, was confessed on the stand during Gallagher's court-martial. The other two cases are more complicated. Army Lieutenant Clint Lawrence was in Afghanistan. A bunch of guys were approaching him. 3 men on one motorcycle were approaching his platoon at speed, and they ignored his signals to stop, and he ordered his men to open fire. All 3 were killed. They convicted him of murder and basically said, this is a guy who is going to spend the next 19 years in prison. The president appropriately, let me say that again, appropriately pardoned him fully. This is a case in which lawyers sitting in some air-conditioned office are second-guessing a split-second decision that a man made while potentially under fire, and a life-or-death decision that could have decided his own fate and those of his men. I think that's the kind of case where the president acted perfectly appropriately. The third case, Major Goldstein, Special Forces Major, accused of, long case going a long way back, about to 2010. Goldstein, again, a Special Forces guy, was questioning a suspected ISIS fighter, and the man was released and then later found shot to death outside the base. That was never brought as charges against Goldstein. To make this thing even more complicated, Goldstein quit the Army, went for a job at the CIA, and admitted some involvement in the shooting when he was applying for the CIA job. He apparently said something to the effect that, he shot the guy because the guy was going to be continual danger to American forces because he was a bomb maker. So he got tried. He got recalled to active duty. He was going to be tried in February, and the president, first off, had tweeted a couple of months ago that Goldstein was a hero, and now he's issued him a full pardon. I don't have a lot of problem with the issue of declaring him a hero, although it was inappropriate. I do have a problem with acting on a pardon before the case had gone before a court-martial. Goldstein was, basically he was claiming self-defense, and I think that was a good claim that could very well have been upheld by the jury, and he could have easily been acquitted. Trump could have pardoned him if he had been convicted. Trump could have pardoned him immediately, and that would have been appropriate. The system of justice on both civilian side and military side is imperfect. It has to be allowed to run its course, and then the president could pardon somebody.
He is Jed Babbin, former United States Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, contributor to the Washington Times and the American Spectator. You can check out his latest piece at spectator.org on this matter he was just discussing of these military clemencies. Jed, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Are you looking for the perfect gift? I hope you'll check out Roland's Jewelers in downtown Libertyville. I love these guys. Mike Gallagher here at Roland's. Not only do they care about making America great again, they also care about making your holiday moments memorable.